Exactly 50 years ago, something special started in Bowden, Alberta. Since then, the Alberta Conference Camp meeting has touched many lives. And this year, we'd like to go back to how it all began. With the very first theme we had at Foothills Camp. We invite you to the 2023 Alberta Conference Camp meeting. Come join us to celebrate 50 years of moving by His Spirit.
New friends, this morning, while we're at camp meeting, we're still on duty and working, so we had some early morning meetings, updates on some of the wildfires and all that. So, hence a few minutes coming of it after our start. But thank you for being here. And as I said, for your attendance here, I have something to give you. So come to the resource tent and see me after the seminar. I'd be happy to share something with you that you can use. So what we did yesterday was we introduced ourselves. So my name is Daniel Scott. I serve as a national program lead for our domestic operations here in Canada, and that includes our emergency development and psychosocial support. I work with Pastor Joseph on some projects at his church at Edmonton Filipino. We had a feeding program to some of the homeless folks, and they're still continuing to do that. We also did eco-based community garden in one of the First Nation communities. Paul, is it?
St. Paul, yeah.
Yeah? Paul First Nation?
St. Paul Reserve.
St. Paul Reserve?
Yeah.
Yes, up on northern Edmonton, northwest of Edmonton, and really amazing work. So what I'd like to talk about a few things is not so much about what ADRA is, just to give you an overview, but also specifically as these seminars have been designed and requested to engage with community, so community development engagement. So if you come back this afternoon, we're going to go more into the details of that in terms of giving you some practical things. In fact, I have like a community mapping and needs assessment. If you would like that, I can send that to you via email so you can have them take it back to your church. So yesterday we did something. We did just a roundtable introduction of your name, who you are, your church, so your background and your church, and what community type of activities or engagement or projects that you have undertaken in your church, and if not, what you would like to do. So, I'm sorry, some people are going to be repeating themselves a little bit because we got some return customers who are patrons and ambassadors and advocates for ADRA, and that's one of the things we'd like you to please keep in mind, that we'd like you to continue to support your humanitarian agency. ADRA is the church's humanitarian arm and agency. And so if you like to be trained as a volunteer, we have that volunteer training that's free, both in disaster and emergency response, in cultural sensitivity, and in Indigenous awareness, and of course on leadership in the humanitarian sector. We also have, if you want further training, we also have, this is a little pitch, Pastor Joe, we're doing a little commercial now. We also have a joint certificate, a 1-year specialized certificate in collaboration and partnership with Birmingham University for humanitarian service workers. So if you want to equip yourself with some more tools, it's all online. Birmingham's offering it starting in September. If you know anyone, yourself or friends or family or children, please let them know that we have this online certificate with Birmingham University and ADRA for humanitarian service worker training. All right? And we understand that in these last days, we're going to see more and more. Unfortunately, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news or doom and gloom, but we're going to see more natural disasters taking place, unfortunately. We know what is to come. As Advent believers, we know that we can anticipate. We've seen right here in the last year, in the last 5 years, what has happened in our world and right here in Canada. I mean, wildfires like out of control, right? Like, how's that possible? I mean, you have maritime, of course, being made, natural, human intervention or our sin, and also natural. So what we find is that we're seeing that spread. Quebec, Ontario, here in Alberta and British Columbia, and it's just increasing, and all other natural disasters on all counts. So how is our church prepared to serve? How is your local church prepared to serve? We had something that we launched called the National Emergency Management Plan, and I see some of you. Melanie? Yes, so thank you for coming back. And some churches already took that training, and there are churches that are yet to be taking that training. And then we have what we call the Local Church Emergency Management Plan. So that in the event that something happens in your local community, your town, your city, your church is mobilized and ready. So you have the emergency plan is a contact list of things that you can offer, your capabilities, your contact list, who you call, how you activate that plan by mobilizing your members, deploying your volunteers, or opening up your church to be a center. I call what we call it an emergency operations center. Could be for shelter, could be for food, etc. So this is just going to be a big overview. So before we begin, as we are already begun, but let us introduce ourselves. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So we'll start from my right and go around this way. Some of you will be repeating, but that's okay. So some of you don't know each other. And one of the things is connecting with one another and being able to share best practices and also ideas. So let's do that. Let's begin. Thank you.
My name is Vita, and this is my husband Victor. He's the pastor at College Christ Church.
Yes.
For Ukrainians. So I will tell what we do because I don't do anything on my own.
Teamwork.
Maybe we together.
Yes. Good to see you again, Pastor Victor.
I'm responsible for Ukrainians in Alberta conference.
Yes.
And yes, my wife speaks English well, so she helped to share what we do. Yeah.
Thank you.
The thing is that we are newcomers and we don't know about local, like all the problems which can be here. Even the wildfires were a surprise for us. But we can help those who are just like us. That's why when we started in College High Church, we do help refugees, not only from Ukraine, but mostly because most of us speak Ukrainian so far.
Yes.
So this is easier, but we want to spread our influence on other refugees. So our projects include English-speaking club, which helps people to assimilate into the society because they don't know the language.
Yes.
We do have some sport activities which help them this is like something recreational. We do provide translation of the worship, which is like spiritual food.
Yes.
And we do have we do help people with resumes and a job research, housing search. There is a warehouse at Berman University established probably a year ago for people who find the housing and need the furniture so church members can donate there and those who need can take from there.
Amazing.
And we do have whatever do we have? So all these activities are aimed for people to feel more comfortable on arrival and to see that there are people who care about them and there is someone bigger behind these people than just these people.
Yes, most Ukrainians arrive without English, so they don't speak English and they need help with papers like SIN number and others, so we help make all these documents.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Pastor Victor. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
And we also have the community garden sponsored by ADRA, and that helps a lot for Ukrainians because this is a tool, this is a place you can grow your own food.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I was so happy to see what was happening. We had some members there from the community who were doing some planting and harvesting, so we're very happy about that. We got to get that sign up there soon, right? And I thank you so much for your ministry and what you're doing, and we're grateful that we can partner together.
Thank you.
God can bless the work that you're doing. All right, thanks.
Yeah, I'm Melanie from Prince George Church. involved in Bags of Love and hygiene kits and layouts for the hospital, maternity and NICU wards, and women's shelter, and shower kits for men's shelter. And we also did a little, our version of a community garden where we had some members that lived far out of town, so they donated some land that we worked in the garden, and then we donated it to our projects. But then this year they found a family in need that could use the garden space. So it's a bit of a different approach to it, but that's what we've done there.
That's amazing. Thank you. Welcome, Melanie from Prince George. Nice to have you with us. Great department today.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Anina. I'm also from College Heights, and luckily you've heard many of the things College Heights is doing already. I also know that often we're part of being working for a better world. I think fairly consistently, at least I've only been there a year now again, so I don't know what exactly what's happening, but I'm very glad to hear about all the things.
All right, welcome Anita from College Heights. Nice to have you with us. Praise God. Good morning. Pastor Cook. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning.
Good to see you all. Thanks for your support. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm variable.
Which church is that?
Fagerville?
Oh, Fagerville, okay. Here in Alberta?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Nice to have you with us, right?
Yeah.
Welcome. All right, our brother.
I'm Gerald, and as I said yesterday, we've had some opportunities to work together. There's a difference when you do something for someone else and the voluntary basis. There's that inner peace that, like the Bible says, he said, that's all understanding.
Thanks.
That inner peace, that joy.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Amen. Thanks, Brother Gerald. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for coming back today.
My name is also Gerald. I live in Oklahoma and I'm not currently involved in any projects.
Yes. You go to you attended College Heights Church?
No, I
Oh, Pinoca. Pinoca, that's right. Thanks, sir. Thanks for coming back. Appreciate that. All right, many thanks.
My name is Gail, and I'm a member of the church. Well, our church is moving, is transitioning, and so we've been renting a space in Okotoks, just south of Calgary, and we have purchased a lot, which is in a place called Gladys on the Ridge. And it's, if you don't know Alberta very well, it's halfway between Okotoks and High River, and then over to the east about 20 miles. So we bought a church that's 100 years old, and we've been renovating it, and it's ours.
That's right.
And we haven't had our first service there yet, but it will either be the following Sabbath from here or the Sabbath after. And Albert Potts said he's going to be there for an inauguration of our
Wonderful.
church, so that's going to be lovely. But we also have 70% Filipino. Probably the next of it is just us guys, and we've got 3 couples who are Ukrainian in this church, so I'm interested in what you serve.
Wow. So you get to talk a little bit after,
Yeah.
exchange. You see, this is what we're talking about. That's the strength. Welcome, Gail from Okotoks. It's nice to have you with us, and the potential for their property and church is tremendous. So this is where we share these ideas. Remember, as a church, it's so easy. We're a large church, and this conference is large, but in coming to you at these times, it's like camp meeting, we can share with one another, we can exchange contact information, we can support one another. This is the strength by pooling our resources together. So thank you all for being here. Now that we've completed all our introductions and our preliminaries, we're going to launch right into our presentation. So as I said, I'd like to share with you some more details. So this morning is just an overview, some practical considerations, and then if you come back this afternoon, we're going to go into more of the community development component. So that means giving you some tools, some community mapping, community needs assessment, Okay, what are the resources you can tap into? Where can you go? And we'll do also a little exercise this afternoon. So if you can come back, that'll be great. I'm sure you have other seminars you will want to go to. So, and then I'm here again tomorrow as well, same time. I'm going to say same time, same channel, same place. But tomorrow morning and in the afternoon as well. So if you can't make it for one of those, please come back because we want to give you some more tools. And I want to give you that, take your email if you would like to get those needs assessments. So what it really is this. At ADRA, what we're doing is we have this concept called think globally, act locally. It's not germane to ADRA. It's a phrase or expression that's used in humanitarian work. But it's something that I caught on when I trained over 20 plus years ago, and that is think globally, act locally. What is our local church doing? The greatest work that can be done is at the grassroots level, where you are. You're making the impact, you're intersecting, you are interfacing, you are interacting, you're connecting with people, connecting with your community. And so I believe as a church, our churches should be agents of change. We should be influencers. We shouldn't be influenced, but we should influence. And I think this is really important for us as a church, right? When Pastor Joseph and I go long way back, we studied together in the seminary, and one of the things we always just talk about is how can God help us to finish this work? And how can we also engage with the community? So while we do believe, and it is, of course, trademark of our church, and it is almost like our signpost. It is, our landmark, and that is evangelism, and of course, preaching, and all of its form. But evangelism is not just simply preaching or coming to church. It is reaching to people right in the community, letting them know that our church cares and we love them. They're meeting them at their point of need. The golden rule I always learned is we need to meet people where they are at their point of need. And then we can encourage them. Then we can point them, of course, to Jesus, who alone can save them and help them and give them hope. And so I believe that community service, community-based work is the best way to do it. I am sure the work you've done has put smiles on people's faces, right? I'm sure the work that you've done has struck up great conversations. And isn't that amazing? That you have probably spoken to people you never would have spoken to in your life. And at the garden, at the Bags for Love, whatever we've been engaged in, it really is a conversation starter. And that's where it all begins. It's building strong relationships. Once we have this strong relationship, people are more apt to come to listen to you. If you invite them to a cooking class, if you invite them to a gospel meeting, right? But it's first that relationship because they want to know they can trust you. But when they see that you care for them, that's an automatic bridge that is built for trust. It's true. So, just by way of further introduction about ADRA, everyone knows simply what ADRA is. Does anyone remember the acronym? I think we shouted out yesterday. What's ADRA stand for, the acronym? Remember?
Disaster. Risk. Something.
Close. Yeah. Those are all important words. Those are good words.
Relief agency.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Advanced Development Relief Agency. In fact, I got to tell you a funny story. We had a major disaster, fire evacuations in Northern Ontario, and one of our relationships we have is with First Nation communities called the Independent First Nation Alliance, and they have a strong relationship with ADRA, so they call ADRA to help them with some emergency intervention operations there. So we did some safe proofing of homes and help with logistics and food and all that. And when we came back, we were visiting, I think just after we came back, we visited the provincial headquarters in Ontario. And they said, "Oh, welcome, ADRA. Are you the new super agency for the government?" And I said, in my mind, I was like, "Yeah, we are a super agency for God," in my mind. But no, so it was amazing how people like the acronym. And so it is Advanced Development Relief Agency. And does anyone know how it started or when it started? And particularly in Canada, I think I touched on some of this yesterday. So some of you were here yesterday, you could definitely type in. Do you remember what we said? How did it start? Does anyone remember? It started out, yeah? Pardon?
Great legacy.
Oh, that's okay, yeah. It started out as SAWS, Social and Welfare Services, part of the, Seventh-day Adventist Church. And then, of course, as the church grew and we connected, collaborated with other NGOs. So you talk about Red Cross, and you talk about Salvation Army and all the other big NGOs. Some are mostly, a lot of them are faith-based, and some are not faith-based. So Red Cross, although it has that Red Cross, and we were told historically it came from a doctor who was a believer who was saving a life. And he put a red cross to actually be a faith identifier, a symbol identifier of saving someone's life. But then, of course, they became more secular as they got more money from the government, etc. But nonetheless, a lot of these services started as faith-based, and they still have their faith affiliation. So we do too, of course. So the church thought it was wise to kind of have the agency at an arm's length so that we can have our own governance, and of course we can qualify for funding from the government so we can do more as well. So the unique thing about ADRA is that, of course, we do not, as an agency, proselytize actively. That means we don't, try to convert people when we're helping them, providing relief and development, right? Because that will show bias and discrimination. So certainly we treat, we care for, we respond to needs regardless of color and religious affiliation and etc. No discrimination. Very impartial, of course, in all that we do. And so that's helpful because we're meeting all sorts of people, all kinds of people, all walks of life. And so that was a wise move our church made. Now someone says, well, what about funding from the government and all that? Well, what's interesting is that the government understands and recognizes that we're a faith-based organization, and they never dictate to us as to, okay, you need to stop saying that you're Adventist or Christian or whatever. No, but there are guidelines. So when we meet people, we're meeting people with no discrimination. So if they're coming, we don't ask them, are you a Seventh-day Adventist Christian? Oh, sorry, if you're not, we can't help you. No, we certainly don't do that at all, by no means. And so there was wisdom when it branched out into becoming the Adventist Development Relief Agency. That's headquartered in Silver Springs, Maryland, of course, under the General Conference. And then, of course, what we have is in about approximately 130 countries. I think it's 128 exactly, but I think we have some other smaller offices that are under a larger office. We have presence in about 100 and approximately 130 countries all around the world. That means we have country offices. So we have ADRA UK, we have ADRA Syria right now. We have offices, as I said, where churches do not exist. So in Sudan, in Myanmar, in Yemen, we have ADRA offices. So what does that mean is ADRA is like the front line. So it opens the door after we provide that development and relief. And then, of course, we can follow up by church members coming in and supporting and directing them to our local church. What's unique is that most of our volunteers, apart from the paid employees, most, if not all of our volunteers are church members like you, each of you. And that's a blessing. So that's how each of you can be involved, individually and at your local church. So in Canada, ADRA Canada was founded, does anyone know? I still give you a prize when you come to the research center. But does anyone know what year? We touched on it yesterday for those who were here. And there was a particular gentleman, he was a pastor here in the Alberta Conference. Does anyone know? Do you remember, Pastor? You know. Okay. Yes, so Pastor John Howard felt a necessity to do something as he went on some mission projects. And so ADRA Canada was established and registered with the CRA. So we established in 1985 and was subsequently registered with the CRA as a charitable organization.
And how far is that from ADRA's local?
How far? So ADRA, the international headquarters, that started somewhere in the 40s, 1940s as SAW, as SAWS, and then it morphed into, I think in the 70s, or 80s as ADRA. And then they adopted ADRA as the name, the acronym, the logo, and then every country would be an affiliate, so an extension. So we have what we call the ADRA network. So here's the beauty. So you said you're from Ukraine.
Yes.
So when we had the Ukraine crisis, we have ADRA Ukraine, ADRA Romania, pardon?
ADRA Poland.
ADRA Poland, thank you. You know, you're familiar. So what we are able to do is mobilize to action. So the network call goes out, right? We have a crisis. Okay, so ADRA International says, okay, we need X amount of funds to raise for ADRA Ukraine. So all the participating countries, as they're able to, will put into that big pool, and then we'll send that money directly to the ADRA office, because we know that it will get there to the people. We don't go through a third party, which is such a blessing. So when we talk about structure as a church, and ADRA, we are so blessed. We move things in such an efficient way. I mean, of course, there's always room for improvement, but it's amazing. So funds were, given, and people were deployed. In fact, we had one of my colleagues that went to ADRA Ukraine to help out with logistical operations and emergency response. So, and it's still ongoing, unfortunately. And we have to pray for the people of Ukraine. So sad. We're hoping that things will be resolved there, but this has gone on way too long. But nonetheless, ADRA has been using our venue. So we have, we use churches and our schools there to set up the operation centers so people can come in, get food, have temporary shelter, get temporary basic healthcare screening. So it's a blessing to be a part of the ADRA network. And so that's how it kind of operates. So in ADRA Canada, we do the same thing. If there's a call that comes from the network, we participate. We'll say ADRA is sending $100,000. For example, you'll see that in my illustration here on the slides here. So let's begin a little bit. So hopefully you can see that. Can everyone see that? So that is our purpose. Can everyone read that together? What does that say? To serve humanity so all may live as God intended. Is that a wonderful purpose? I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that what God created us to be? That we become our brothers and sisters' keeper. That we are there to serve. And as we serve, we are representing the true character of God. There is no greater representation of God than the service we render. Do you agree or disagree? The service we give, the selfless service, and that's what we hope and pray, it comes from all of our hearts. That service, that the love of Christ motivates us, constrains us, is that service to humanity, to all people, regardless of their religious affiliation, their background, their orientation. Because here's the truth, that everyone on the face of the planet is a child of God. And those who don't know it, it's because they don't know it yet. And that's the truth. But we're there. And as we serve them and we demonstrate the compassionate heart and love of God, hopefully that love will awaken that love in their hearts to recognize the love of God for them. So I love our purpose. It is so powerful. It is pure. And it is passionate. And then our motto is these three words. And at the end, some of you were there yesterday. You know where that verse comes from. But it's justice, compassion, and love. That is the three buzzwords. Those are the three critical key words that kind of fuel the work that we do. Justice, compassion, and love. And you will see the verse of Scripture where that comes from. So, as I said, we're operating approximately 130 countries in the world. And of course, ADRA, the goal of ADRA's work is this, for it to be sustainable. In other words, as they say, that saying that goes, give a man or a woman a fish and feed them for what? A day. Teach a man or a woman to fish and you feed them for what? A lifetime. That is how ADRA operates conceptually. Our notion is to partner with community. So we don't go and say, hey, we're here, we're going to take over now, we got it, this is what you need, this is what... No. That is actually the wrong approach. We don't dictate, we don't tell people this is what you need, or I think this is what you need, or if you don't listen to us, we're not going to help you. We don't operate like that. That is absolutely unchristian, unprofessional. So what we do is we listen, we learn, we observe, and we hear what the needs are. So that could be through key informant interviews, having groups gather like yourselves and telling us, okay, what's happening in your community? Can you tell us? And then we visit the site. And as we build that trust and relationship, then we say, well, you know what, ADRA, we can offer the following. Would this be of help to you? And they'd be like, yes, thank you so much. And then can you train us? So we'll offer training if it's in agricultural techniques, eco-based gardens, if it's in health education, if it's a water project, if it's a sanitation project. We have these many multiple projects you'll see that I'll be sharing with you just for your overview and just for your knowledge and awareness of what we're doing. So we're also culturally sensitive. So if we're going to community, we want to respect that culture. One of the things that we have done recently, especially at the national program, is the Indigenous work in Canada. I just came back not too long ago from Nunavut, and we were up there, and it was amazing. And I'll share a story with you at the end. I think I shared it yesterday, but we touched base with connecting with people, listening, observing, call it a listening tour, because we want to know what's happening. And of course, we know that mental health issues, lack of affordable food or healthy foods, they're doing their best, but it's very difficult. And especially in remote communities where they have limited access to food and, of course, health education. So we want to help them as best as we can. So we go in to listen, to learn, and to create a program that the local people can take ownership of, so that when we leave, the program continues. Like community garden, when the garden will continue. We and agriculture, you'll see that after that, when they are empowered with the tools, then they take the ownership of the program and they feel great about it. And it's very rewarding and satisfying. So in this map, you can see just a global spread of the work that we're doing. So as you know, most people understand that ADRA is doing work internationally. So yes, our emphasis has been for a long time global work, because there are greater needs out there, but there are great needs here too. And so one of the most recent concerns that were arisen, and not just concern, but interest over the last few years, what are we doing here locally in Canada? And we see that there are great needs here in Canada, in remote communities, isolated amongst the Indigenous populations of Canada, as well as inner city, urban missions. So there's a lot to be done. So we realize that we need to rethink the way we do our development work, not only internationally, continue to build on that, but also focus on the home front. And that's what we're doing here. That's what we've been doing for the last close to 4 years, building up our domestic operations, okay? So we have much more than 66 projects now. We have probably 80 plus, close to 100, and we're serving well over 1 million plus people directly assisted by our work. So these are slightly a bit dated, but these are some countries that we have current projects. Some are closing off, new projects have opened up. But just to give you an idea, so in terms of the two major categories of work we do, development and emergency. All right, so what's emergency? Well, you know what it is, crisis, disaster, or wildfires. We just helped Maritime Conference by providing some emergency assisting funding for communities of not only our members, but members or residents of the community that were evacuated. They needed shelter, they needed some food, they needed some emergency care kits. And so we are using two of our churches that have been equipped for that and have been trained with our emergency management plan. So that's locally. So emergency, you can see here, St. Vincent, we had a big eruption of the volcano. You had Niger, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, you had Kenya, Nepal, Sudan, Thailand, and Yemen. In some of these countries, we don't have a church presence. So remember I told you we have no church presence in Sudan and Yemen, but we have an ADRA office there. So the church is represented there by our humanitarian work, by our ministries of compassion. And then development, you have Cambodia and Laos, Mongolia, Myanmar, Philippines, Rwanda, and Zambia. Has any one of you been to any of these countries?
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell me? Let's share. This is interaction. Tell me which countries you've been here on this slide. Go ahead.
The Philippines and Thailand.
Philippines, Thailand.
Zambia.
Really? You've been to Zambia? Wow. Okay, we have some world-class travelers here, Pastor Joseph. Wow. Well, you know Pastor Joseph from the Philippines, so he's been there. I mean, he was born there. Yes.
I was going to say, I haven't been to Yemen, but I lived in the Middle East closely for I think it was 3 years.
Did you?
And also lived with the Middle East in, in Edmonton. And,
Okay.
you know,
So-
I have a knowledge of Islam.
When you say Middle East, you talk about Lebanon or
I lived in Lebanon, but I spent a lot of time in Jordan.
Jordan? Okay, we have a big church in Lebanon. We have our Middle Eastern University there, and the ADRA office is there. It's called MENA, Middle Eastern North Africa.
Yeah, so
Yes.
if you want anybody going into a Muslim country, I'm well aware
Wow.
of the restrictions. Yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar with the culture. Brilliant. Thank you, Gil. Anyone else? Any countries? Gerald, have you been to any of these countries? Would you like to go? All right, Gerald wants to make a local impact. That's okay. Anyone else who's been to any of these countries? Melanie, have you been to? No? Okay. So isn't it amazing? I just think about, we think about the gospel encircling the globe. And where does it all begin? It begins right here, but from here we can reach the world. And it's so amazing. So continue to, as I say, pray for and support your church and the ministry of ADRA, because it is amazing what God is doing through your prayers and through your support. And we ask you to continue to promote that. So one of the things that we do is water, right, is a necessity. It's a vital commodity. It's often called the miracle or the gift, in the Middle East, right? Because water is scarce. So it's a miracle, right? The gift of water. And so many countries are stricken by drought and famine, and they don't have access. So building wells. So in this project with Cambodia, we have a project there on ensuring that they have water from a drilled well, and that's so important. Then, of course, there's a program that we also do is empowering this community in the Philippines where they don't have access to a local bank, but they create this kind of like this community banking conglomerate, kind of not conglomerate, but just kind of like a consortium, an alliance.
Cool.
Yeah, co-op. Yeah, something like, thank you, Pastor Joe, like a co-op, and they can share. So you have a local treasurer, and people will give funds, and then if there's a need or people need some money, they apply, and then it just circulates, and it's very helpful to build up the community. So that's something that they do in the Philippines.
There's
Words? Yeah, it's probably difficult to hear that, but you can see that it's a local co-op, so that's what they're doing. What is the currency in Philippines? Is it pesos? Pesos, yeah. So this is very helpful, where people don't have to go to those big chartered banks, and that they can get local financial assistance and help. I'm sorry that we can't hear that too much, but we'll try. There's a last video I want you to see before you go, and it's very moving and powerful. Rwanda is another country. You know the terrible history of Rwanda, the genocide. That's very, very sad. One of the things is we're building their ability, giving them the ability to live off the land. And so you can see children are here, teaching them from young to appreciate the land, growing their own food, sustainable practices in agriculture. And this is amazing work that we do in Rwanda as well. So you can see the global impact is being made, and just building these trenches and ditches where water can stay when it gets dry or drought, then the water can stay in ditches and help with their irrigation techniques to water their plants so they can grow healthy and, of course, luxuriantly. Dry zone is a huge thing in some of the countries that we serve, and so that's a huge thing. Also, access to emergency care. One of the things we do is we sponsored an ambulance so that they can move people from the remote villages to one of the centers where they have a health clinic, and they can get health care. So that's another big work that is being done as well with ADRA. So they were able to get a new ambulance and service several villages that are remote, and then be able to transport them to, of course, to the place where they can go get medical care. One of the big Christian-based organizations right here, it's based in Winnipeg. It's called Canadian Food Grains Bank, CFGB, and they're a consortium of farmers across Canada, particularly the prairies, so from, of course, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and they provide funding for NGOs like ADRA, who are actually doing food projects, sustainable food projects. So it's amazing. We're able to get some funding from another Christian organization because they do not implement. ADRA implements projects. So one of the things that ADRA does is not only do we provide education, training, but ADRA implements projects, monitors and evaluates it, and then of course gives the final reports or accounting and reporting so that people and of course whatever organization or agency or government that gives us funding, we're able to provide the reporting mechanisms, the budget report, the narrative report. Some of you know this, Melanie, you'll know that, because we always require whatever funds that we give, we do ask for a report back. Why? Because two things, for auditing purposes, right? And of course, for sharing and promoting what has been done. So that's why it's so important to have that. And that's one of the reasons why your humanitarian agency, your church's humanitarian arm, ADRA, has a sterling, as I mentioned yesterday, a sterling reputation with the government and other NGOs because they respect the work that ADRA does. It's amazing. In fact, I think I told you yesterday, and I'll repeat it again, that an evaluation audit was done of many of the NGOs, and ADRA came in the top 3 in terms of reporting, accountability, transparency, fiscal management, and also the lowest administrative fee that is used from the money given. So from the money given, we have less than 7% that's used for administration and internal use in the office. So that means more of the funds are being delivered, majority of the funds, 93+% is going toward the projects, to the work, to the ministry. So this is one of the wonderful benefits and blessings that your church's humanitarian arm agency delivers, both internationally, globally, and also right here in Canada. Amazing stories. I can tell you a lot more. Bahamas. So, quick example of this. The network call went out from ADRA International. Bahamas had a big Hurricane Dorian, devastated the entire island, and we said we would commit to X amount. I believe it was maybe 300,000 or something, and we sent out an appeal to all of our churches across Canada, and many members like yourself gave money toward this, and we were able to make a significant contribution by purchasing a water bladder filtration system. And they were able to deliver it from the US to Bahamas, and they still have it now. It purified desalinated the water, purified it, and gave like hundreds, thousands of bottles and gallons, those big containers, filled them up for people to have clean drinking, cooking water. It's amazing. So that's kind of what the network does when there's an international call. Recently, we had wildfires. We just launched here in British Columbia. We had wildfires in 2021, and many members gave, and we were able to support the operation. In fact, the government of British Columbia, mentioned to you, asked us if we would manage the provincial operations for the warehousing management of donations. And other NGOs couldn't do it, but because we have our volunteers, like members like you all, each of you in different churches, we were able to do that for British Columbia in 2021, and it was a very successful operation. So we're working, again, internationally. That has historically been ADRA's position, but now we are revitalize our national program here in Canada, and some of our other sister offices, ADRA country offices like Australia, and I believe Czech Republic, they have very strong national or domestic programs. Not only do they serve internationally, but also in their home country. All right, so this was a story, but this just a devastation of Bahamas. Just a quick view that you can just see it really leveled the island. I'm sorry, is the speaker on, Pastor George?
Can I try it over here? Can I transfer this? Okay.
Sure, yeah, take it away. Just wanted to just check some troubleshooting. So we're gonna have. I know we have to land the plane very shortly in a few minutes. I think we're just about 10 minutes or so. But as Pastor Joseph does that, any comments or questions so far? Because I've been talking a lot. I want to open the floor, lest you forget about anything you may want to ask.
Right?
Right?
This one?
Excellent. Thank you. Receive funds that provided a soup kitchen that they fed people for like over, like months, and then also helped in the rebuilding and recovery, which is still going on right now. They've come a long way, but there's still, after devastation like that, it takes time. You never get back to where it once was, as we say normally. Very difficult. You can see they're in that kitchen cooking that very healthy Adventist food there. So. Indonesia, tsunami, just complete devastation, and it's really sad. We have, that big earthquake in Syria that they had. So we have an office in ADRA, Syria, but we don't have a church there. But ADRA has an office there. So one of my colleagues who works for our national program, she was deployed there, and she's been there. She's going to be there for 6 months. She's got back in September, and she's helping out there. So this is one of the things that really moves me, that is, we can have a presence in places where our physical church doesn't exist. So shelter distribution is a big thing. Bangladesh, when they had the mudslides and all that, you can see some of those rice paddies all got flooded, so they needed sanitation and water hygiene projects, something we call wash water and sanitation hygiene project. We do those kind of projects. Water, again, is a big issue, especially when it's contaminated. We need to make sure that people are getting fresh water, and of course, shelter above the mud. So there's a lot of projects that we have been engaged in that really has helped people in times of emergency, crisis. The Rohingya people, the internally displaced persons, that was a big food distribution project we had there. Kenya, as you can see, we have another food agricultural project, which is a very important one that we do. And again, water, you can see how broken up that dry and parched that land is. And some of the water that's there is dirty, it's not clean. So they need to get clean drinking water, right? Because water is one of the fundamentals, basic need. So we keep building. One of the other programs we do is kind of menstrual hygiene in Uganda. So for young ladies, very important. And one of the stories I think I told yesterday was that it's very sad in many cultures where young ladies are taken away, abducted, taken away as wives, but also because mothers, in terms of their family surviving, they sell their daughters, unfortunately, into this type of prostitution and slavery and trafficking. It's very, very sad. And so ADRA has a program called Keep Girls Safe, a project. There's one in Africa, I think one or two in Africa. This one is in Thailand, where they help to rescue young ladies from entering into that life. And completely, it just traumatizes them and devastates their lives. And it takes years of healing and recovery. So I'm so glad that we're able to do that. That comes under that justice buzzword that we have. Remember our motto: justice, compassion, and love? And that's huge. So that's part of the justice, social justice, advocating for those who have no rights or not able to exercise those rights. I think that's very important. Jesus, when he walked this earth, he believed in equity and fairness and justice. He sure did, right? And he spoke to those issues. So should we not, as believers, I'm not saying we become political, but we have a social justice cause. And I think that's very, very much part of every part of the gospel. Would you say? Very much so. So for those who are marginalized, those who are, ostracized, those who are, treated unfairly and equitably, whether it be children, elderly, women, whoever they are, that is part of the gospel to improve people's lives, to improve the quality of people's lives, not only here and now, but of course, ultimately, forever. And only Jesus can provide that for them, but at least we can help them with their temporary needs. So this is very, very powerful. Just a quick thing that you'll see a short video there.
Keep her safe, provide a very safe environment for them. Also provide opportunities. We're not available when they want to stay in the village, but when they come to us, they can have an education, they have a safe place. The stories of the girls who keep her safe are not unique. They are very common stories, and we keep hearing the same story in the villages.
Essentially, the premise is to give them a bright future and to help them, those who've been trafficked, enslaved, abandoned. And that's a powerful ministry. And we think that this is happening just some far away place. You know that human trafficking happens right here in Canada. Right in Canada. But it's very, of course, a little bit less, in a larger and less conspicuous because of the country in which we live in, but it happens, and it's real. I'm not saying that we have to, there's so much going on, right? So we have to know where we can serve, what the needs are in our local community, and help to meet those needs. But I think it's important for us to be a voice, and I believe that if Jesus was here, we would see Jesus doing a ministry that would not only move us, but even shock and surprise our church and many of us. But thank God that we can do what we can, do our best to do a ministry that is outside of the box, a ministry that reaches people that would not normally reach, or people who would not come to the doors of our church. So it is imperative for us to do this. I want to show you this last video that's very moving, and then I will close with a short story and have any comments or questions, and then we'll close up our presentation for today. everywhere in school, one of the strong pillars of a program is to ensure that children who do not have access to education get that education. Because education is key to freedom and to opportunities that normally they would not have. And so I'm really grateful that we can provide that platform, as it were, that platform. We can provide that platform for them. I think it's good now. We can provide that platform for them to have that education. So, you know, when we think about having to go far, when we think about having to travel to distant lands, we don't have to. I remember Senator Murray, first Indigenous senator for Canada, said this, you know, in kind of paraphrasing, quoting, he said that we live in a first world country, but in our first world country, there are those who live in third world conditions. And I've seen that, and I didn't believe it until I began to travel a little bit more to remote parts of Canada. I came back from Nunavut, as I said, most recently in June. We went to the capital, Iqaluit, then we also went to Iqaluit, which is 2 hours north above the Arctic Circle. There's no trees there, it's all tundra region. And what was amazing is that the gospel went up there. We had an Adventist worker, a Bible worker, and also a social worker that went up there. And there was a wonderful lady who was baptized over 15 years ago in the Arctic Ocean. In fact, it's amazing that she told us a story about the history, and I was so moved. In fact, we had a great time to talk with her. She said, well, it's sad we don't have ongoing support, we don't have a church here, but I try to keep the faith. She had a radio ministry going on. But when I asked her about giving up some things of her culture, because you know that culture is it's Inuit culture, right? So they're indigenous, but Inuit is very unique as part of the indigenous peoples of Canada. They have a unique culture. And part of their lifestyle is nomadic, so they move a lot, right? They hunt and seal and all of that, and fish. And she said there are things she had to give up, and it was a bit painful. But I said, what about the Sabbath? And she began to tell us a story. She said her grandfather, as far as she can remember, her grandfather passed on through oral tradition, through storytelling, to her mother, that they kept the seventh day as part of the gift from the Creator to care for the creation and the land, and on the seventh day as the day of the Creator's rest, that they would also honor the Sabbath. And they call it in their language Inuktitut, which is their language, they call it Sabbati, which is, you can hear the derivative coming from Sabbath. Like in French we say Sabbat, and in Spanish it's Sabado, right? Amazing. You know that there is a word in every language for Sabbath, and they all have the same root meaning. God is working. When we think that there are people in remote areas, they don't know the Creator, God has revealed Himself in so many ways. So we don't go there with a mindset to say, oh, these are people that, you know, are behind God's back. Let me tell you, no one is behind God's back. We'll be surprised. And we can learn so much from people who, even in their own walk and their spirituality, we can learn so much. So I've learned one of the great things is to get rid of this bias that we have as believers, as Adventists. You know, we have a culture in Adventism, somebody knows what I'm talking about, and it is so easy to get caught up and consumed by that culture. But when we understand all men and women, boys and girls are created in the image and likeness of God, and everyone has a divine impress, an imprint of the image of God. And when we do this work, hopefully that resonates with them. And so I just hope and pray that you will continue to support and pray for the ministry of ADRA, continue to promote and advocate this work, and above all, get involved. We want you to be involved because we want to finish this work. And many people will come to know Jesus as a result of these ministries of compassion. So I want to encourage you to be involved. Get your church involved. If you need to get some more information, please reach out to us. We have our website, our number. Come and drop by at the resource tent and center. As I told you, I got something for you. for being faithful and coming out this early morning on this beautiful day. Come over and I'll share something with you that will be practical, something functional, something to protect your eyes or to relieve some stress. So come on over, we'll be happy to share that with you at the resource tent. Any final comments or questions before we close? Please, Anita, right?
I'm just wondering, in terms of like the trend in volunteers, are you experiencing that there are more volunteers recently or less volunteers recently?
We have had an increase, thank you for that good question, Anita. We've had an increase in volunteers, especially during the pandemic. We have over 1,000 volunteers across. That's not a lot to bring back. That's over 1,000 volunteers and trained volunteers, and we want to continue to train more so that you get a certificate from ADRA when you're completed. So as an ADRA volunteer, saying if you went through some basic training, the DER, disaster emergency response, and what other courses we offer. And it's amazing that if we can have those when we have, say if we have a crisis disaster or a project in Prince George or in Macomb, we can say we have these cluster of volunteers. We can contact you and activate and deploy so you can be helping. And you might be helping alongside with other NGOs, but at least you're trained and vetted through ADRA to have some exposure to humanitarian work. It's amazing. Great question. And I want to remind you that we do have that Bourbon certificate, so if you're interested, or others in your church or young people, please promote it and pass it on. That's a great question. We need more.
ADRA is very vital in our ministry, especially when there's need for calamities.
Yes.
And it needs funding. My question is, where do ADRA get some fundings to be distributed in the churches?
Where do we, or how do we?
Yeah, where or how?
Where? Well, a lot of the funding that ADRA gets is what we call restricted funds, designated funds. So funds that come from the government are for a specific project that we applied for. Number one. Number two, when there's a like Ukrainian crisis, a call goes out to the network. So members, our church members would say, hey, we have a campaign for ADRA Ukraine crisis. And so members would give generously and donate, and then we compile those funds and we give it to that specific cause, right? And then our churches give, and our conference gives like annual offerings. We have the disaster relief offering, so we collect those offerings and then we're able to put that in our general disaster pot. So when there is a crisis, then we can say, okay, we can give 5,000 to Alberta, or 5,000 to British Columbia, or 5 or 10,000 to Maritime. So that's where most of the funding. And then there are private donors that give money and they say, okay, we would like it to go to wildfires, we'd like it to go to earthquakes, we'd like it to go to our Canadian national programs. And so whatever funds we get, and it's specific and it's also indicated, designated, we use it for that purpose and that purpose alone. Yes.
Another question, because a lot of members of our church are wondering why in when there's some disasters or some calamities,
yes,
ADRA is not being seen. They only see Red Cross and different agencies in the government.
Yes.
So why are we not in there?
Visible. Thanks, Pastor Joe. So here's one of the things. ADRA believes in humility. No, we do. We don't spend. We don't spend our money on big advertising. Those Red Cross, they use a lot of money for, because there's what we call political affiliations and all of that. So we remain, non-partisan, non-political. While we have government relations, we don't spend a whole lot of money on advertising. And we try, like camp meeting, you'll have a visibility items, you get a pen or something from us. But there are times when we have been interviewed and we have been on newspapers, like locally, the Globe and Mail reached out to us and I was able to be interviewed for our volunteer program. So it actually was on a Globe and Mail article back a few weeks ago. So every now and then we do get it, but we're not up there to spend, that money. We use that money, Pastor Joe, and we put it into the ministry projects. Mm-hmm. But on a good note, on that point, I think we probably need to step it up a little bit more, to be more visible, to let others know what we offer.
More donors also.
And that's true. Thank you, Pastor Joe. And that more visibility will attract more donors. Thank you for that. And whatever you can do Like, for example, if Prince George is doing something and the local newspaper wants to cover it, absolutely, nothing's wrong with that. That local will help to raise awareness in your local community. Even in Lacombe, I think, you could do an article in the Lacombe newspaper and say, hey, we have this community gardens where it's a joint partnership between the College Heights Church and ADRA and all that. That's good for visibility. And visibility, nothing's wrong with it. We need that, absolutely. And it's a way for us to get the word out there, our message out there, and also to raise some extra funds. Thank you. Our last text I'm going to leave with you is coming from Micah 6 verse 8. You know that verse, he said, it's shoot thee, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require you except to be just, to love, to diligently practice kindness and compassion, and to walk humbly with your God. That's the humble part there. But these three things, remember our three buzzwords? What were they again? Do you remember them? What's our three buzzwords for our motto? What is it again? Justice, compassion, and love. And so this is the capstone text from which we derive those three words from Micah 6 verse 8. So may God continue to bless you in all that you do. We want to partner with you. We want to work together. And may God use us as His agents of change to change one life, one community at a time. This is our finest hour on planet Earth to do this work. And we know what's coming, so let us be there. So when that time comes, as I say, when things are changing and restrictions, and the people in that community will be able to stand and say, that church, Prince George, College Heights, Ponoka, Okoto, they love and care for this community. They will speak and vouch for us. We won't have to do it. So may God help us to sin. Let's all stand together and say, and let me just pray as we close our presentation. Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for waking us up this morning. Thank you for inspiring us, O Lord. We're so blessed to be a part of this Advent movement. And I want to thank you for each of my fellow sisters and brothers and the churches represented here. I pray that you will empower them. I pray that you will encourage them. I pray that they will continue to step up to the plate, and even if they're few in number, to advocate, O Lord, and to continue to do this work of community engagement and transformation, because this is what you've called us to do, to be your hands, your feet, your mouthpiece, your instruments, O Lord, especially in these closing times of Earth's history. So I pray that you will give us that passion and that compassion that comes from your heart of love. And may we have a beautiful day. Bless us and keep us faithful to you as we serve you and others until we meet again, is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for being here. And please come by to the resource tent. I want to give you something because you deserve it.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.